My name is Arthur Reed, 66, and last night my own daughter told me I don't live here anymore. I didn't shout. I didn't slam doors. I stood in the hallway with the same coat I bought the winter Helen got sick, a coat that remembers the smell of clinic disinfectant better than it remembers the smell of December air. And I looked at my daughter's hand on the door the way I used to look at her hand when she was 3 and would press it to my cheek to feel my stubble and laugh. Except last night, the hand wasn't soft with sleep. It was steady, certain. She had a look I've seen in young accountants when they talk about cleanup, not about blood, not about dust, but about numbers and files and signatures. "Dad," she said, "this is for your own good. You can't be alone in a big house. We've sorted things out. Ethan and I agreed." I didn't ask who asked Ethan. I didn't ask when I'd stopped being consulted about a life I paid for with 40 years of work and every hour of Helen's care. I looked behind Clara at the kitchen wall. Our family calendar wasn't there anymore. The paper one with notes in Helen's neat blue pen. Dentist appointments, Clara's piano recitals, my reminders to buy lemons for Helen's tea. The wall was blank, like the house had been staged for strangers. My breath fogged the glass even though it wasn't cold. I could hear my heart in my ears, and beneath the rush there was something else. A sound I have trouble describing, like the way a room hums after a refrigerator shuts off. The world goes quiet in a way that tells you something essential has left. "Leave the keys," Clara said. And it was my daughter's voice, but also not my daughter's voice, and I thought, I am not the first father to hear a child speak with somebody else's certainty. "We packed a bag," she added, and for the first time I noticed the suitcase near the door. It was mine. The handle was set to my height. "I'll call you," Clara said. "We'll visit. You need rest. We all do." I set the keys on the table. It's funny the things you notice. How keys sound different when you lay them down with care versus when you drop them on purpose. Helen used to say every sound has a reason. I left the keys carefully and picked up the suitcase. I didn't ask about the photo frames that had been turned to face the wall, or the missing calendar, or why the kitchen smelled like a new sponge instead of garlic. I stepped outside, and my daughter closed the door, and the door's latch clicked, and my house, our house, exhaled without me. I didn't cry in the car. I drove to the motel off the highway that Helen used to call the place with the miracle parking, because there always seemed to be a spot right by the lobby door, even on the busiest nights. I checked in and told the young man my name, and he typed author by mistake, and I didn't correct him. The room was one of those rooms that forgets to be anything but a room. 2 lamps, a square table, a carpet the color of old gum, a bathroom mirror that made everything half a shade greener. I put the suitcase on the bed and sat on the chair and looked at nothing until my eyes watered from the kind of dry that feels like it comes from inside your bones. I took the ring from my pocket. The nurse had pressed Helen's wedding ring into my hand the morning she died. "Hold on to this," the nurse whispered, and I said, "I don't need to hold on to a ring to hold on to her." And then I cried into my coat sleeve like a boy. I keep the ring in a small velvet pouch Helen used for earrings, and I bring it out when I need to talk to her the way we used to talk late at night, after Clara was asleep, when the clock in the hallway sounded like a heartbeat and the radiator hissed like a friend. "Little fox," I said, Helen's old joke because she said I looked at the world as if it might scurry away if I blinked too hard. "They sent me away from home." The heater in the motel clicked on, and the smell that came with it was metal, the smell of pennies, of things that outlast us. I sat very still and listened to the heater's rhythm until it was something like company. People will tell you loneliness is a room with one chair. They're wrong. Loneliness is a room where every chair is still warm, but nobody left a cup, nobody left a book, nobody said, "Be right back." Loneliness is the residue of presence. It's the indentation on the pillow when you return from turning out the light, and Helen isn't there but the pillow still remembers her. It's hearing your daughter use a plural, "we've decided," and realizing you are not included in the mathematics of your own life. I didn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, I did what I always do when I can't sleep. I made a pot of tea in my head. Boil the water, find the lemon, whisper to the clock, listen to Helen's feet on the kitchen tile, wait for the kettle to sing. In my head, she handed me the lemon and said, "Arthur, read the paper," because she never got tired of that joke. Instead of tea, I opened the folder I had carried all these months without reading. It was the one Helen left me with a yellow sticky note. "Only if you must." Inside, on top, there was a letter in Helen's hand. "If anyone ever tries to push you out of your life with paper," she wrote, "push back with paper." There were copies of documents, words like trust, amendment, durable power of attorney. There was the name of a lawyer, Maya Cole. There were dates and signatures and a clause highlighted in yellow ink that said, in plain language, that if any family member exerted undue influence over me to separate me from my home or resources, the trustee would be authorized to intervene, suspend their access, and return control to me pending a review. I held the paper like a lifeline, not because it promised victory, but because it promised order. Grief makes you a stranger to yourself. Paper makes introductions. It says, "This is where you are." It says, "This is what time it is." I called the number as soon as the son remembered the motel existed. A woman with a voice that sounded like somebody who has a row of pens in a mug, and they're all capped and they all work, said, "Cole, Glass, and Finch." I said my name. There was a quiet click of keys. She said, "Mr. Reed, of course. Maya can see you at 10. I didn't stop for breakfast. I drove in the kind of fog that isn't in the air, but inside your windshield. Maya's office was on the second floor of a building that had a dentist, a travel agent who still used brochures, and a plant store that smelled like wet soil and hope. The hallway carpet had that same old gum color as the motel, but the walls had framed photographs of neighborhoods I recognized without knowing why. The reception area had a jar of lemon drops. I took one, and it tasted exactly like pretending. Maya shook my hand, the way you shake the hand of somebody trying to be brave. "Mr. Reed," she said, "Helen told me you'd come if you ever had to. I'm sorry this is the way we meet." "I'm not here because I'm weak," I said, and heard my voice crack on the last word. "I'm here because I'm alone." She nodded, wrote that down, and then slid a box of tissues toward me like a person who understands that paper comes in more forms than one. I told her the truth, that I'd signed papers after Helen died because Clara told me to, that the notary had been a friend of Ethan's, that I hadn't read closely because grief uses your eyes to look backward, that I'd noticed things disappear, my calendar, my spare keys, my place in my own living room, that I'd been told my home was too much responsibility, that last night the door had closed and my life had stayed on the other side. Maya drew a simple picture on her legal pad. 3 boxes labeled home, accounts, authority. She drew arrows from authority to the other 2. "When someone gets a durable power of attorney," she said, "this is how it's supposed to look. The arrows point to support, not control. You can authorize help without surrendering your life. But when the wrong person holds that document, the arrows flip. We're going to flip them back. How? I asked. My voice sounded small, not because I felt small, but because the room had a way of making everything measured. Helen would have liked that. She believed in rooms that helped. We file for a temporary restraining order to freeze any transfers, Maya said. We challenge the power of attorney on grounds of undue influence and defective notarization. We notify your bank's fraud prevention unit. They're good at pattern analysis. They'll see the transfers. We gather evidence, texts, voicemails, witness statements. We get you home for the duration of the case. Will there be sirens? I asked. Only if somebody insists on adding noise, she said. Our job is paper. Paper makes quiet decisions that last. I breathed, not deeply, but enough for the room to feel like it had oxygen again. And if we lose? I asked, because I have been an accountant too long not to ask about the negative column. If we lose the temporary order, Maya said, we appeal. If we lose the appeal, we regroup. But Mr. Reed, if what you're telling me is accurate, and if your late wife's trust has that clause, you are in a stronger position than most people who sit in that chair. She tapped the yellow highlighted section in Helen's copy. This is what we call a trigger. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it tells the court what your wife believed and planned, that your continued residence and autonomy mattered, and that your daughter's access to assets would be conditioned on her respect for those priorities. Clara isn't a villain, I said, as if the room had accused her. She's my daughter. She's tired. She's married to a man who confuses efficiency with kindness. The court doesn't need villains, Maya said. It needs facts. I told her everything else I could remember. The night Ethan put the papers on the kitchen table and said, "Just sign and sleep." The strange calm of the notary. A man who wore a wristwatch that looked like it told a different time than the one we were in. Clara standing with her arms folded, which is how she stands when she thinks she is protecting herself. Maya made copies. She called the bank. She asked me for my phone. If your daughter calls, she said, let it go to voicemail. We need the recordings. Don't confront. Don't argue. We let the paper speak for you. That afternoon, I walked out of Maya's office with a stack of forms and a plan that felt like a hand on my back, guiding me forward. The sky was the color of dishwater. The plant store downstairs had moved a rack of ferns to the hallway, and one brushed my shoulder like a person who doesn't know how to apologize but knows they should. I went back to the motel and sat on the bed and folded the edge of the first page and thought, I am doing something. Even if the something is small, it is mine. That night, Clara called. I let it ring until my voicemail began to speak for me. Her message was brisk, then tender, then angry, then tired. Dad, we can't keep doing this. The house is too much. You forget things. Ethan's trying to help. Please stop making everything harder than it needs to be. I listened twice, then I forwarded the audio to Maya with the subject line Helen would have chosen. First piece of paper. 2 voicemails later, Ethan texted, Bank needs your confirmation for some routine transfers. Can you send me the code when it arrives? I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged with a security alert from the bank. Unrecognized device attempting access. I forwarded that as well. Paper and its little digital cousins, speaking for me. At 8:12 the next morning, Maya called. The judge signed a temporary restraining order, she said. Transfers are frozen for 72 hours while we appear in court. The bank has flagged recent transactions and initiated internal review. Mr. Reed, go buy a toothbrush you like. You may be going home sooner than you think. You make it sound simple, I said. It's not simple, she said. It's orderly. There's a difference. The hearing was 2 days later, in a courtroom that smelled like dust and lemon oil, which, if you've lived a good life, is the smell of respect. Maya wore a dark suit that made the light in the room look brighter. Clara sat with Ethan 2 rows back. She looked so much like her mother from that distance that I had to close my eyes and count to 10 so I wouldn't call her Helen and make a fool of myself. When the clerk called our case, Maya stood. She is not a tall woman, but she stood like a person who had learned the trick of adding a little height in a room built to shorten people. She stated our request: continuation of the temporary order, return of keys and possession. Pending outcome: suspension of the contested power of attorney, accounting of recent transfers, appointment of a neutral trustee to review the trust's trigger clause. Ethan's lawyer tried to oppose everything at once, which is one way to concede you don't know which argument matters. He used phrases like family dispute and harmless reallocation and necessary for care. He pronounced durable like it was a threat and father like it was a burden. He said I was grieving and said it like a crime. Maya didn't once raise her voice. She introduced the notary log that showed the man had stamped my signature before I arrived at the kitchen table. She introduced the voicemail in which Clara said, "We decided" 5 times in a minute without saying "Dad" once. She introduced the bank alert and a string of transfers with descriptions that read like a man reorganizing a life with someone else's money. She introduced the highlighted clause in Helen's trust and the letter that explained why she had written it. Helen's careful, exact words about the man she married and the daughter she loved, and the simple fact that love is not the same as access. The judge listened. Judges are taught to listen like clocks listen. They count the seconds between things and look for irregularities. At the end, he took off his glasses and looked at my daughter. "Ms. Carter," he said. Clara kept her mother's maiden name and wore it like armor. "Tell me why your father's keys are not on his ring." Clara did not speak for a moment, and in that moment I wanted to stand up and say, "She is tired." I wanted to say, "I asked too much of her after Helen died. I asked her to be my memory when I lost mine." I wanted to say, "Please don't make her cry." But I didn't. I have learned that rescuing a child from the consequences of a choice can be another way of taking something from them. Clara finally spoke. "I thought I was helping," she said. She looked at me with a sudden ferocity, like a child daring a parent to contradict the truth they have built as a shield. "You weren't sleeping. You were leaving the stove on. You put the lemon in the cupboard and the sugar in the fridge. You said Helen's name at the sink. You looked lost." I nodded. "I was lost," I said softly. "But lost isn't the same as gone." The judge extended the restraining order, suspended the power of attorney, ordered the keys returned by end of day, and scheduled an evidentiary hearing 3 weeks out. He appointed a neutral trustee to administer Helen's trust, while the court reviewed the trigger clause. He told us, both of us, to be careful with our words. "Families have long memories," he said. "Don't give yours a scar that will itch in winter." Ethan muttered something into his lawyer's sleeve. Clara cried in the hallway, the way people cry when they haven't let themselves cry for a very long time. Soft shoulders, small hands. No noise. I stood near a radiator and counted the hisses, while Maya spoke to the trustee on the phone and set dates like a conductor calling for the brass to come in on measure 17. I went home to a house that looked like a place I might like to know. The photographs were still turned to face the wall. The calendar was still gone. The lemon bowl was empty. But the floor had that sound floors have when they remember your shoes. I walked through each room and said hello in my head. I didn't touch the bed. I sat at the kitchen table with Helen's folder and made a list. Lists are how I say grace. That first night back, I ate soup standing up because chairs felt like decisions I wasn't ready to make. I put the ring pouch beside my bowl. The heater in the wall clicked on then off, and in the rhythm I heard Clara at 5, singing to herself while she drew a picture of a house with 4 windows and a door and a chimney. She always drew smoke like letters that had forgotten how to stand in a line. The loneliness did not end when I returned. Home is not an antidote to solitude. If anything, the wood and paint of a house conspire to amplify what you bring through the door. The difference was I could be lonely in my own room. That's a privilege you don't understand until you lose it. For 3 weeks, we prepared. Maya taught me that preparation is a kind of love. For yourself, for the story you're asking someone else to hear. We gathered statements. Mrs. Ellison from next door wrote about the night she heard Ethan say, "Just sign and sleep." The mailman wrote about forwarding notices Clara had filed without me. The bank's fraud prevention unit sent a report, neat and bloodless, that said more about what had been done to my life than any speech could say. The trustee reviewed the trust and wrote a letter of opinion that read like a teacher reminding a class of a rule everyone had agreed to, but some had pretended was new. I didn't see Clara during those weeks, except at the grocery store once when we both reached for the lemons and both drew our hands back like the bowl had teeth. She looked past me toward the freezer section, or maybe toward a future where I would not be an equation she had to solve. I said, "How's Lily?" And she said, "Fine." And we stood there like 2 people who read the same book years apart and want to talk about it, but can't remember the same chapters. The evidentiary hearing was quieter than the first. There is a kind of quiet that comes when people realize the story they are in will follow them out of the building. Maya began with facts. Ethan's lawyer tried to make it about feelings, the kind that disguise control as care. Clara testified. When she described me putting lemon in the cupboard, the judge smiled the smallest smile a human can smile and still call it a smile. "We all do that," he said, "and we aren't all evicted for it." Maya introduced the notary's disciplinary record, a reprimand 2 years earlier for stamping a signature before a signer arrived. She introduced the bank report showing a pattern of consolidation transfers, the kind accountants run when they want to prepare for a sale. She introduced Helen's letter to me, the one that said paper is a way of pushing back, and when she read the line aloud, I felt the entire room exhale. Judges hear a lot of words. They don't often hear the exact right ones at the exact right time. The judge upheld the suspension of the power of attorney, converted the temporary order into a preliminary injunction, and returned full possession to me pending final disposition. He ordered Ethan to reimburse the trust for fees paid to the notary and the consultant who had advised them on asset simplification. He did not scold Clara. He did not have to. Courtrooms have a way of making you scold yourself in the car on the way home. Afterward, outside, Maya said, "This is the part where you eat something you actually want, not something that fits into a schedule." We walked to a diner that smelled like coffee and pancakes, and a more forgiving decade. I ordered lemon tea because of course I did. When the cup arrived, I held it in both hands like it might teach me something if I kept it still. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we breathe," she said. "The trustee will manage the trust and monitor compliance with Helen's clause. We'll work on a permanent arrangement, something with boundaries and dignity. If Ethan continues to press, we push back. If Clara asks to talk, you decide how much of your heart you can offer without breaking it again." I nodded. "What would you do?" I asked. Maya smiled. "I'd take a walk in my own neighborhood without counting my steps," she said. "Then I'd buy fresh lemons and put them in the bowl on my table. And I'd put the bowl exactly where I like it, not where someone else thinks it goes." That night, I did exactly that. I walked the block and listened to the way my house sounded from the outside. There's a hum old houses have, like a throat clearing before a song. I put lemons in a bowl and set it on the table where Helen had always put them, slightly to the left because she said the right side belonged to the newspaper. I turned the family photographs around. I left Helen's ring on the table beside the bowl like a period at the end of a sentence I was learning to read again. Days grew into something like a rhythm. I made lists I could finish. I answered the door when the trustee came by with forms and listened to the relief in her pen as it filled boxes meant to be filled by people who had not been erased. I started going to the library on Thursdays because the librarian smiled like a person who has learned to be a mother to books and therefore knows a little about being a mother to strangers. I returned to church not because I found God in a particular pew, but because the pews sound like family when they creak. I began to write letters to Helen I never sent. In them, I told her about Mrs. Ellison's tulips and how they always come up crooked, and she loves them more for it. I told her about the lemon bowl and the way the color catches afternoon light, as if it's practicing forgiveness. Clara called once, then twice, then not at all. When she finally came by, it was a Tuesday. Tuesdays are the days when the mail is thick with catalogs of lives I'm not living. She stood on the porch with her hands inside her sleeves the way she does when she wants to be 9 again. I opened the door and said her name, and the way I said it, soft, careful, like saying a word of a language you used to speak, made her cry. She apologized, then apologized for apologizing, then tried to stop crying and failed, then laughed at herself the way Helen used to laugh when the cake sagged and she said, "We'll call it a valley cake." "I thought I was fixing it," she said. "I thought I was building walls to keep the wind out. It turns out I was building them around you. Around me, too. I couldn't breathe, and I blamed you for all the air I was missing." "I left the window open," I said. "You closed the door." We stood in the kitchen, and I made tea, and she didn't flinch when I put the lemon on the cutting board and the sugar in the jar where sugar goes. We talked about boundaries and trust and how love can be a blanket that smothers if you pile too many layers on a small bed. We talked about Ethan and the way power turns some men into their own echo. We agreed to let paper do some of the talking. A caregiver 2 days a week by my choice. A written schedule I could revise. A key on a hook that belonged to me. And a promise that any paper that had my name at the bottom would also have my eyes at the top. The trustee wrote it up. Maya looked it over. We signed on a Thursday. The pen felt good in my hand, which is not something you notice when you're young, and every pen belongs to the future. I won't pretend everything healed in a signature. Family is not a spreadsheet you reconcile and stamp balanced. Trust is not a switch. It's a dimmer, and somebody's hand is always near it. There were days Clara and I spoke only about the weather, which is how people apologize when the word sorry is too heavy. There were days I picked up the ring pouch and asked Helen, Was I a good father? And the silence said, You were a man who tried, which is the only kind there is. There were days Ethan called to offer advice, and I said, No thank you, and hung up before I could make the no softer. But there were other days, too. Days when Lily came over with a school project about family trees and asked why ours looked like it had been pruned with a kitchen knife, and I showed her how trees mend. Days when Clara cooked in my kitchen and cut onions with the same small knife Helen used, and we cried for reasons the onions decided to share. Days when the lemon bowl looked exactly right and the house hummed the tune I'd been trying to remember since the night the door closed. One evening I took a walk not around the block, but to the park where I taught Clara to ride a bike. The bench was the same. The tree near the path had grown into the shape of a question somebody forgot to ask. I sat there until the streetlights came on, and the dogs took their owners home, and the air smelled like grass, deciding to forgive winter. I thought about the first day Clara let go of my hand and knew she could keep moving without me. That day felt like pride. This year, when she let go in a different way, it felt like loss. But maybe both were the same motion, and the difference was whether I believed I could still hold my own balance. On my way back, I passed the corner store. The owner, Mr. Patel, waved with a rag in his hand. "Mr. Reed," he said, "you need lemons?" And I said, "I always need lemons." And we both smiled because it felt like a joke and a truth at the same time. There is a lot the law can do. It can draw lines and assign keys and send paper to stand in front of you, like a taller cousin. But there is more it can't. It can't make a daughter call. It can't make a husband wise. It can't make a house a home. Only people do that. In the long, ordinary way, we do everything that matters. Small cups of tea. Doors opened gently. The same joke told until it becomes a family story. I keep the folder Helen left in the top drawer of the kitchen desk. Sometimes I open it the way some men open a Bible. Not because I need to read the words every day, but because holding them tells me I am not adrift in a world that can be rewritten by anyone with a pen. On the first page, under her letter, I taped a photograph. Helen in the kitchen with lemons in her hands and a smudge of flour on her cheek, and Clara at 8, looking at the camera the way people do when they still believe the camera is a mirror that tells the truth. If you are listening to me now and you know something about doors closing, about voices that say, "We decided," when what they mean is, "You didn't," I won't tell you to fight. I will tell you to find paper. Find a person who knows how to make paper speak. Let it ask for your keys, your chair, your name on your own mailbox. Then, when the noise settles and the house hums again, do the harder work. Write a list of small kindnesses and do them not because anyone deserves them, but because you do. Make the tea. Turn the photos around. Put the lemons in the bowl and set it exactly where you like it. Clara brought Lily over last Sunday. Lily has learned a piece on the piano that sounds like a window being opened. She played it, and the house changed shape around the notes. Clara washed the cups without asking where they go, and put them in the wrong cupboard. And we both laughed. And later I moved them and didn't make a speech about it. When they left, Clara stood in the doorway exactly where she stood the night she told me I didn't live here anymore. And for a second, the two nights overlapped like film. "I'm trying, Dad," she said. "I see that," I said. "Do you hate me?" she asked. And there it was. The question that had been pacing in my chest for months, wearing a path I tripped over every time I went to the sink. "No," I said. "I'm lonely." "That's different." She nodded. I'm lonely too, she whispered, like confessing to a crime the court couldn't try. I didn't think stealing your life would steal mine. We stood there, two people in a doorway, holding a word we'd both been avoiding because it sounded like defeat. But loneliness is not defeat. It's a signal. It tells you where the bridge should be. It tells you that family, when it's right, is not a place you go when you're perfect. It's a place you go when you're learning to be less wrong. After they left, I opened the kitchen window. The evening came in and sat on the table like a friend. The lemon bowl glowed. The ring pouch lay beside it. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't take the ring out to talk to Helen. I spoke out loud into the room and used my own name with my own voice and said, "Arthur, you live here." And the heater clicked on and off and on as if to say, "That's correct. I am not naive. There will be more hearings, more forms, maybe more nights at the motel if paper decides to sleep elsewhere while it sorts itself out. There will be dinners where we chew through silence like it's tough meat. There will be holidays with chairs we leave empty on purpose and chairs that are empty by accident, and the sharp little pain both kinds bring. There will be days Clara makes a choice I wouldn't make, and I will not make the mistake of mistaking my preference for wisdom. There will be days Ethan tries to insert himself into rooms he hasn't earned, and I will stand like a doorframe and say, no. But there will also be this room, this bowl, this sound the house makes when I walk upstairs to the bedroom and sit on the edge of the bed and take off my shoes and remember that I am allowed to leave a book open on the nightstand in the exact place where I lost my place. There will be mornings when I wake at 5 because grief taught me to wake early, and I will go to the kitchen and boil water and slice a lemon and lower the tea bag into the cup and wait for the water to color and turn sweet and say, "Good morning, Helen," and then, quieter, "Good morning, Arthur," and both greetings will be true. If there is a moral here, I don't know it. I am a man who kept good records and lost his way anyway. I am a father who made a child and then helped her become someone who made a decision that hurt us both. I am a husband who loved a woman who understood that love without boundaries is just a flood dressed as a blessing. I am a person with a house that hums. I am lonely, yes, but I am not alone in the way that matters most. I have a name on a mailbox, a key that fits, a chair that remembers me when I get up to stir the soup. And I have paper. It is not glamorous, and it does not glow, but paper is persistent. It keeps time like a clock that refuses to lie. It says, "Arthur Reed lives here." It says, "Clara is welcome in this kitchen," when she knocks and wipes her hands on the towel by the stove. It says, "Ethan may wait in the car until he learns how to enter a room without rearranging it." It says, "The trust your wife wrote is not a weapon, it is a bridge." It says, "The law cannot make you love each other, but it can make space in which love might try again." Tonight, I will leave the porch light on, not as a signal, not yet, but as a habit. Helen used to say that so much of love is habit, repeated without applause. I will sit at the table and do a small crossword, and when the heater clicks on, I will look at the bowl and say out loud, "I live here," because sometimes the truth requires practice. And if the phone rings and it's Clara, I will let it ring a second longer than necessary so I can listen to the way her name sounds in the room when the phone says it. Then I will pick up and say, "Hi, honey," and if we talk about the weather, that will be enough. The weather is a way of saying, "I know where you are." Some days, that's the whole task. Other days, we will ask harder questions. We will decide where to put the cups. We will move the bowl to the left, then to the right, then back again. And we will laugh at ourselves because that is what families do when they are building a house from the inside out. I don't know if we will be better. I know we will be here. And here, for now, is not a small thing. When I finish this cup, I will rinse it and set it by the sink to dry. I will turn the photographs so the faces look into the room, and I will tell them the story of a night when a door closed and a house exhaled without me, and a morning when another door, paper, quiet, patient, opened. I will tell them that loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of being known. And then I will take my own hand, the way I used to take Clara's, and I will say, "Hold on." And I will, and I will, and I will.